Peter Thiel, the contrarian who became the paradox. In 2016, Peter Thiel, a man who had made billions by backing Facebook when it was worth nothing, publicly endorsed Donald Trump. Within months, his venture capital firm's reputation fractured. Within years, founders and companies actively avoided his money. A $27.5 billion fortune couldn't buy back what he'd lost: relevance. Today, we're going to find out exactly why, and what every founder and investor should take from this. Peter Andreas Thiel was born German and American, but he built an identity around being the smartest person in the room who saw what everyone else missed. In 1998, when the internet was still a place people connected to with modem sounds, Thiel co-founded PayPal with a simple observation: the future would need digital money. Most people thought that was insane. Most people were wrong. PayPal wasn't just a company, it was a thesis. It was Thiel saying, out loud, that the world was going to change, and if you weren't paying attention, you'd be left behind. By 2002, PayPal was worth enough to sell to eBay for $1.5 billion. That sale did two things: it made Thiel rich, but more importantly, it proved something he already believed, that if you understood the future 5 years before everyone else, you could build something worth $1 billion. That confidence would define everything that came next. In 2003, Thiel started Palantir Technologies. This wasn't a consumer product. This was a tool for intelligence agencies and governments to process massive amounts of data and find patterns. If PayPal was about making money digital, Palantir was about making surveillance efficient. Thiel built it quietly, without the fanfare of Silicon Valley, because its customers, the CIA, the Defense Department, don't advertise their tools. By the time most people knew Palantir existed, it was already embedded in government operations. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2004, Thiel made a decision that would define his entire legacy. He wrote a check to Mark Zuckerberg, $500,000 for 10.2% of Facebook. Facebook was a website where college students looked at photographs of each other. Institutional investors passed. Venture capitalists called it a fad. Thiel saw it differently. He didn't just invest money, he invested a thesis. He believed that mapping human relationships and attention was the economic prize of the century. That check turned into $1 billion when Facebook went public. That billion turned into more. By any measure, Thiel had won. He understood how technology would shift power, and he positioned himself at the center of it. In 2005, he started the Founders Fund, a venture capital firm that backed Airbnb, Spotify, and SpaceX. The pattern was unmistakable: Thiel had a gift for seeing the future. What made Thiel unstoppable wasn't luck or connections. It was a specific skill. He could articulate a contrarian view with such confidence that people believed him. He wrote essays about technology competition. He gave talks about stagnation. He published a book called 0 to 1 that became scripture for startup founders. If Peter Thiel said something was the future, venture capitalists listened. If he said something was dead, entire markets died. The stakes were enormous. By the early 2010s, Peter Thiel wasn't just an investor, he was an ideology. He represented the idea that intelligence, ruthlessness, and contrarian thinking could generate unlimited returns. Founders wanted to think like him. Investors wanted to fund what he funded. He had built something rarer than money: intellectual authority. Then came 2016. And this is where the story transforms. Thiel had been building a case for years. Technology was slowing. Competition was crushing innovation. The political system was broken. Universities were failing. The mainstream consensus was always wrong. These weren't new ideas from him, they were the same contrarian muscle he'd flexed successfully for 2 decades. But in 2016, Thiel applied that same pattern to presidential politics. He endorsed Donald Trump. And he didn't endorse quietly. He did it publicly. He spoke at the Republican National Convention. He said the mainstream media was deceiving people. He said the political establishment didn't understand the future. What no one realized at the time was that Thiel had made a category error. Being contrarian about payment technology or data analysis or social networks was different from being contrarian about political leadership. In those domains, you could be proven right by market returns. You could point to your net worth and say, "I saw the future." But politics doesn't have that feedback mechanism. Politics is belief-based. And when Thiel's political beliefs became visible, something broke. Companies that had once courted him started returning his calls differently. In 2018, his mentor and fellow PayPal founder Reid Hoffman published a book criticizing him. Startups that might have taken his money decided it wasn't worth the association. When Thiel spoke publicly, he was no longer the oracle, he was the controversial billionaire. The infrastructure of respect he'd built over 20 years started to fracture. But here's what really happened. Thiel confused intellectual contrarianism with correctness. For decades, his contrarian views had been right because he was analyzing domains where reality kept score, where billions of users and dollars provided feedback. But when he entered politics, he was still playing the same game, with the same confidence. Except now, the feedback mechanism was different. There were no clean metrics. And worse, his intellectual authority, the thing that made people listen, became a liability. If he was wrong about his political diagnosis, maybe he was wrong about technology too. The doubt spread. By 2020, Thiel had become a cautionary tale rather than a template. Founders still read 0 to 1, but now as a historical document from an earlier era. Venture capitalists didn't cite him as an influence. His political positions had become so entangled with his brand that you couldn't separate the investor from the ideology. A $27.5 billion net worth became almost a joke, a man too rich to understand why nobody wanted to take his advice anymore. Thiel had optimized for being right. He had never optimized for being believed. And when those two things diverged, his entire empire of influence became worthless. Here are the two concrete lessons every founder and investor should extract from this. First, authority in one domain doesn't transfer to another. Thiel's success in technology prediction came from being embedded in that world, from having real feedback mechanisms. When he moved to a different game without different rules, his confidence became a liability. Check your expertise. Know where your pattern recognition actually works. Second, reputation is a floating asset, not collateral. Thiel thought he'd built something permanent. He'd built something fragile. The moment you stop generating new proof points in your domain, people start questioning your old ones. He won. He just stopped winning where it mattered. Subscribe to Tech Postmortem. We break down one tech story like this every week.